Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Suranjali Seal, and like I always say, if you are somebody that loves literature and is all about literature, then this is the channel for you. In our video today, we're going to discuss the literary characteristics of the Anglo-Saxon or Anglo-Saxon period. Now, in my previous video, if you have watched it, then this is going to be really clear for you. If you haven't watched my previous video, then please do so, because it was a foundational video. It was the video that covered the basic storyline or the basic timeline of the Anglo-Saxon period. Now, just to recap, in my previous video, we've discussed the circumstances under which the Anglo-Saxons and Jutes found their way or made their way into Britain. And we've talked about Celtic Britain. We talked about the starting, right? We talked about Celtic Britain, which was pagan, and that time you did not have the Roman conquest, you did not have the Anglo-Saxons and Jutes coming in. It was Celtic Britain. The Britons were living there. We talked about the Picts, we talked about the Gaels, we talked about the Scots, we talked about all these indigenous people who were living in Britain at the time. Then we talked about Roman conquest of Britain, when Britain became Roman Britain. Then we talked about sub-Roman Britain, when Britain broke off from the Roman Empire. So what was the impact? Then we talked about, these autonomous kingdoms coming up, fighting with each other, people from outside finding their way into Britain. We talked about the circumstances leading to the Anglo-Saxons and Jutes coming to Britain, invading Britain and settling there. And after that, we also talked about Old English language. That what is Old English language? It is an amalgamation or assimilation of all these languages mixing together. So that was more like a storyline. I gave you a storyline. It's the foundation, it's the basics. So if you've understood that, then you can move on to this video. This video is a more factual one. It is something that will deal with the more factual aspects of literature from this period. It's going to talk about, say, the manuscripts. It's going to talk about timelines. It's going to talk about dates. It's going to talk about the advent of Christianity. It's going to talk about books. It's going to talk about the works from the Anglo-Saxon period. So this is a more factual. If you have understood that video, which was more like a storyline and understanding conceptual video, this is a more factual one, and it is absolutely necessary for us to understand all of this as students of literature. So this video or these slides that I have prepared today will all deal with the more factual aspects of literature. This is the literary characteristics from the Anglo-Saxon period. So without any further ado, let's get right into it. So like I've mentioned, just a recap, we talked about Celtic Britain up to 55 BC. Now here I've included dates as well. In my previous video, I haven't included dates. I've just given you the simple foundational storyline. Here I have given you the dates. Celts, free from invasions, okay? When Romans did not invade Britain, when Romans did not come into Britain, there was no outside or foreign invasion, okay? Till 55 BC, it was Celtic Britain, it was pagan Britain. Then you have the Roman conquest in 55 BC, and to 407 AD, it was Roman Britain, and in between you have the Anglo-Saxon invasions, which is 407 AD to 787 AD. In this whole period, you already have the disintegration of the Roman Empire. If you've watched my previous video, this will be clear. I've talked about the heptarchy. I've talked about the state or region consisting of 7 autonomous regions, government by 7 rulers. Now, after Anglo-Saxon period, we talk about the Anglo-Norman period. We say that Anglo-Saxons ruled till this time, or this was the Anglo-Saxon period. From 1066, the Norman conquest of Britain begins. In between, we also have the Viking invasions. Now, the Viking invasions from 787 AD to 1066 AD, these are the Viking invasions, okay? And they invaded twice. So it was a period of war and it was a period of skirmish. And finally, we have the Norman conquest. So this is just a recap. What we did not discuss is this: Christianity's presence in England. Christianity's presence in England has been recorded, and what is the timeline or what is the date? That it was there in the 2nd century AD, that Christianity had already made its way into 2nd century AD, with evidence suggesting it was introduced during the Roman period, and its spread was further solidified by the Gregorian mission in 597 AD. What is the point? Why am I telling you all of this? Why am I saying that Christianity came into England, Anglo-Saxon Jutes came into England, Vikings have come to England, we've talked about Celtic Britain, Romano-Britain? Why am I saying all this? The reason why I'm saying this is that I've told you time and again that literature is a reflection of the times, right? Whatever our sensibility is, whatever our moods are, whatever political scenarios are there, even today, they will find their way into literature, because literature is an expression of life itself. So why am I saying that Christianity had come? See, you have Celtic Britain, then you have Roman conquest of Britain. In between, Christianity also made its way. Then you have Anglo-Saxons and Jutes coming in. Then you have the Vikings coming in, going war, loot, all of this is going on. And then you have the Norman conquest. All of this together, they, like, I'm repeating this again, you actually together, all of these things contributed to the literature of the times. Now, early Roman Britain, 2nd century AD. Christianity likely arrived in Britain during the Roman period, with merchants and soldiers from across the empire settling and potentially spreading the faith. So, you have merchants from the Roman Empire going there, from Britain going outside for trade and commerce. And then you have, you have you can say missionaries, you can say monks, or you can say, the Pope would send people along with these merchants and soldiers when they would come back. And they would come back, and monks and missionaries would come and they would spread the faith. So it is not something that you have to brainstorm. These are just facts. There's nothing to explain here as much, but you have to only remember that all of these contributed to the literature of the times. So and also literature of the times, how? Because suppose you have Roman Britain had a particular way of life, the pagans had a particular way of life. Now you have Christianity coming in, so that will be a different type of life, that will be a different worldview altogether. So all of these will be in your mind, right? You're processing all of these things as a human being with your mind, and when you produce literature, all of that will be reflected in the literature also. So this is what Britain was like at the time. So survival in Western Britain. Christianity persisted in the western parts of Britain, even after the departure of the Romans in areas where Anglo-Saxons did not settle. So this is again facts. The Gregorian mission in 597 AD, the Gregorian mission led by Augustine of Canterbury was sent, like I told you, was sent by the Pope to convert the Anglo-Saxons to Christianity, making a significant step in the spread of Christianity in England. So like I said, it does not happen all of a sudden. All of these things are happening gradually, like little by little, year by year, decade by decade. Slowly these things are happening. It does not happen overnight. King Ethelbert of Kent. King Ethelbert of Kent was the first Anglo-Saxon king to be baptized around 600, and he played a key role in promoting Christianity in his kingdom. So you have the Anglo-Saxons and Jews staying there, then you have the first Anglo-Saxon king who converted to Christianity. And if the king is converting to Christianity, then it's more likely that he's going to, preach or propagate this whole idea to his people also. So my point over here is that, you remember these facts, that Christianity also made way. You have to, but just remember this, that all of these things are important. Why? Because they affect the sensibility of the time. They affect the lifestyle. They affect the literature. Whatever is produced, we know very little from the Anglo-Saxon period. Not much has survived from the period. So, whatever little we know, all of that reflects the life of the people at the time. So this is just the first slide. It's an overview. Now we're going to go more deeper into the facts. Now, just a while ago, I have mentioned to you that the Anglo-Saxon period is very little is known from the period. Very little literature, very less is produced, in this time. So that is why the Anglo-Saxon period is also known as the Dark Ages. So Anglo-Saxon period from 450 to 1066 AD, is sometimes called the Dark Ages due to a perceived decline in cultural and scientific progress compared to the Roman era. So during the Roman era, there was progress. There was a lot of scientific progress. There was a lot of literary also. There was a rich production, and literary aspects of life was also cultivated, and here in the Anglo-Saxon period there was very little in cultural and scientific progress. And can you tell me why? I've already mentioned this, even I think I mentioned this in my Caroline period or in my interregnum, civil war and interregnum period. I told you, anytime there's war, anytime there's political and economic unrest, you'll focus focus on survival. You will not focus on writing a book. Okay, there are exceptions. There are many people who during wartime and during economic unrest have written phenomenal works of literature, no doubt. Okay, but I'm saying in general, if there's a war that's happening, your focus will be on how to survive. Your focus is going to be on how to win or how to, protect your kingdom. That's your number one cause. Now, during the Anglo-Saxon period, I told you that these Anglo-Saxons and Jutes, they were in constant war with each other. They were constant war with the indigenous people who were also living in England, okay, at the time. So because of this, there was not much cultural or scientific progress. You were focusing on securing your kingdom. So, as compared to the Roman era. So, and a scarcity of written records from the period, leading to the lack of detailed knowledge about daily life. So we don't even have that much of knowledge. There's this written knowledge of the Anglo-Saxon period also is very scarce. So that's why we don't have a proper definite knowledge of the life of this period. Whatever little we know from the few works that have been produced and preserved. So the Anglo-Saxon period in Britain lasted from approximately 410 to 1066 AD, a time of war, the breaking up of Roman Britannia into several separate kingdoms, religious conversion, and continual battles against the Vikings. That's what I'm saying. So it's continuous battles, and then you have religious conversions. Like, you're not at peace, you're not settled. So there's a lot of things that is going on, and that's why we don't have much that we know about this period, but we do know a little. And from where do we know this? The sources for early Anglo-Saxon England, okay, where do we get our idea of this period from? There are many, okay, there are 2-3 works that actually talk about Anglo-Saxon period, but the most celebrated one is this one, Ecclesiastical History of the English People. And who has written this? It has been written by Bede. So Bede, also known as Saint Bede, the Venerable Bede, or the Bede the Venerable, was an English monk. Like you see, he was an English monk, author, and scholar. He was one of the most well-known writers during the English or early Middle Ages, and his most famous work, The Ecclesiastical History of the English People, gained him the title the Father of English History. So again, facts that we have to remember. Who is known as the Father of English History? Bede. And what is the work that he wrote, or which work tells us about the Anglo-Saxon period? It is the Ecclesiastical History of the English People. And he served the monastery of St. Peter and its companion monastery of St. Paul in the kingdom of Northumbria of the Angles. So he was staying with the Angles in Northumbria. This was one of those autonomous kingdoms, like I've already mentioned in my previous video. And he was staying there, and he wrote this, the Ecclesiastical History of the English People. And this is the book written by Bede, which gives us a sneak peek or an idea of life of the Anglo-Saxon period. So this is, again, facts. Now we're going to move on to the next slide. So we're going to talk about the literature. Finally, we're going to talk about the works that we know or that have come out of this period. So the primary literary forms of this period were epic poetry or heroic poetry. We have elegies, then we have Christian poems, and we have some prose works. This is broadly the kind of literature that have come out, that has come out from this period. So what is epic poetry or heroic poetry? I've already discussed this in, I think, one of my other videos. I've already discussed this, but I would want to discuss it again. So, epic poetry or heroic poetry, what do we mean by it, and what are its characteristics? So an epic poetry is a long narrative poem, okay, that means it tells a story that recounts the adventures of a hero or heroes, often involving supernatural elements and significant events for a culture. So for a culture, now you have to understand this, that it is a narrative poem, okay? It tells a story like what? Mahabharata, okay? It is, or the Ramayana or the Mahabharata or the Ramayana, okay? Ramayana or Mahabharata from our country itself also is epic in nature, right? It has epic characteristics. It is 2 of the longest epics in the world, right? So you can relate it with that, okay, to understand what do I mean over here. What are the characteristics? You have heroic figures, right? So let's take Mahabharata for example. You have heroes, right, over there, the Pandavas versus the Kauravas. So you have heroes, features protagonists who embody the heroic ideal. Heroic ideal. I'm giving you characteristics, okay? I'm giving you literary terms that you can understand along the way as we study literature. So you have heroic features or heroic ideals. That is, what is Yudhishthir? Yudhishthir's ideal is righteousness. right? So you have valor, courage, honesty, truthfulness. All of these are embodied in the hero, the ideal hero who you can look up to, who you can follow. So you have the heroic ideal often possessing exceptional qualities like strength, courage, and leadership. So you have an ideal hero to follow or look up to. Then you have grand scope, that it takes place in vast settings. In Mahabharata, you're traveling, you're moving from one place to the other throughout, okay? And you have, it takes place in vast settings, sometimes encompassing the entire known world or multiple nations. That is, you're traveling over the whole country, or you're traveling over the whole world from one country to another. So it's a grand scale, okay, that you're actually encompassing or trying to cover. Then you have divine intervention. Divine intervention often includes the involvement of gods or supernatural forces. So in case of the Mahabharata, you have Krishna, right? Krishna is the one who like, he is the one, we can consider him as divine intervention. Of course, he is the one who fits in to this whole narrative. He is the divine intervention that actually guides everything, okay, that who knows everything and guides everything towards its end. So often includes involvement of gods or supernatural forces. So you have elevated language. Supernatural forces, you can also equate it to the Ramayana also has supernatural forces. So epic literature, epic poetry, heroic poetry consists of all of these characteristics. Then you have elevated language, uses formal and poetic language. It is not informal. The language is poetic. We all know that. If you consider the Iliad and Odyssey also, it's poetic. The language is very poetic, very organized, and very formal, but all the while it's telling a story. Then you have formal structure, typically written in a specific meter, because it's poetry, so you have a formal structure. There's a particular meter that is followed, though this can vary by language and period. Why language and period? Because you can then later go on to write a story, just a story, in prose form also. So all of this is the characteristics of epic poetry. Now from this period, Anglo-Saxon period, in this sense, what are the works that embody the characteristics of heroic poetry from this period? So you have the most famous, widely celebrated, all of us know this, the first thing when we study the history of English literature, when we cover the Anglo-Saxon period, the first book that we are always talked about, or the first book we are introduced to and is always talked about, is Beowulf. So Beowulf is is the epic poetry, heroic poetry from this period. It has all the characteristics of epic poetry or heroic poetry. We have Beowulf, then we have fight at Finnsburg, we have the Battle of Brunanburh, then we have the Battle of Maldon. The most important one is Beowulf, the fight at Maldon, the fight at Finnsburg, and Waldhere. So all of this, okay, is epic poetry, heroic poetry from this period. Now, I'm not going to go into the summaries of this here. I was thinking that I'll make small summary videos of each of these works. So you can find it in my later videos. Here I'm giving you just the names that you have to remember. So this is epic poetry. Now we're going to move on to the elegies that have come out from this period. So what is an elegy? I've discussed this also before, but I will still repeat it. What is an elegy? Elegies are traditionally used to mourn the death of someone or something. So, but they can also be used to reflect on broader themes of loss, morality, and the human condition. So elegies are traditionally, usually, they are written to mourn the death of someone, okay? So this I've already explained, okay? So I'm just going to give you the facts here. So you can also talk about, you can cover general loss or morality and the human conditions here, all right? And please do forgive the background noise. I actually misplaced my headphones or earphones. I cannot find them anywhere, and also there's construction going on around the house, so please do bear with me. I'm trying my level best. So I will get the sound quality to better for my next video, but please do bear with me for this one. So having said that, we have elegies, okay? So I hope you understood what elegies are. Now I will name the elegies that came out of this period, okay? These are the elegies we have to remember as far as the examinations are concerned, and as students of literature in general, we should know these works. So you have Dior's Lament, you have the Wanderer, you have the Seafarer, the Wife's Lament, you have the Husband's Message, and the Ruin. So amongst these, the most important is Dior's Lament, of course, the Wanderer, the Seafarer, the Wife's Lament. These the first four are very, very important. but yeah, remember the rest as well, okay, for tick marks and all of that. So this is elegies. These are elegies from this period. Then you have Christian poems, naturally, because from 2nd AD Christianity had come into England, so you have Christian poems also. So you have okay, for Christian poems, these are not names I have given here. You have to understand the Caedmonian school and the Cynewulfian school. These two schools are the ones that produced, say, Christian poems, okay, celebrating, say, hymns, celebrating God, talking about God, okay. So these two schools, the Caedmonian school and the Cynewulfian school or Cynewulfian school, are the two schools that produced Christian poems. We're going to talk about them in my next slide, okay. So just remember this. And some prose works. So prose is a style of writing like ordinary speech using sentences and paragraphs. All novels are written in prose, but not all prose is a novel. So I'll tell you this, okay. What is prose? That you write in paragraph form, okay. So you are not writing in poetic form using rhyme and meter. You're using ordinary speech using sentences and paragraphs. All novels are written in prose. Of course, paragraphs and sentences, all novels are written in prose, but not all prose is a novel, because we have essays also, right? Essay is also written in prose form in paragraphs and sentences. So this is just a food for thought. This is something we have to be clear and remember as students of literature, that all novels are written in prose, but not all prose is a novel, okay. So this is done. We're going to talk about Christian poems in my next slide, and then we're going to also talk about the prose works. So let's move on further. So let us have a look at the Caedmonian or the Caedmonian school, okay. So the Caedmonian school or the Caedmonian school in Anglo-Saxon literature refers to the body of religious poetry, primarily Old English, that was once attributed to Caedmon, the earliest known English poet, and his supposed divinely inspired gift for composing such verse. So what do we have to remember here? What do we have to understand? Caedmon was a monk, okay, and he is known as one of the earliest English poets, okay, and his school, okay, was that part of Anglo-Saxon literature which refers to the body of religious poetry. Remember, these are Christian poems, religious poetry, which can be attributed, which he has written, attributed to him, that he has written all of these poems, okay. And people who wrote similar poems like him was said to belong to the Caedmonian school. For example, I write poetry, okay, so I only write, say, nature poetry, for example. I'm just giving an example. Then you, and then your friend, and your friend's friend, everybody starts writing nature poetry. So they will say this is the Suranjali school of poetry. I'm just giving an example, okay. So similarly, Caedmonian school is that Anglo-Saxon literature, that whole body of literature which refers to the religious poetry written by him, and also people who wrote similar type of poetry like him. So it's the Caedmonian school. It's very easy. What do we have to remember? Which fact do we have to remember here? That he is regarded as one of the earliest known English poets, okay. Another thing you have to notice here, divinely inspired gift for composing such verse. We have to understand this. Caedmon's story. What is his story? Bede in his ecclesiastical history of English people. So you remember, how is this work so important? Bede's work is so celebrated. Why? Because we're getting all of these information from his work. In his book, Bede writes that he recounts how Caedmon, an illiterate cowherd at the monastery of Whitby, received a dream vision introducing him to sing of the creation. That is, Caedmon was illiterate. That means there was no way that he could actually compose such phenomenal hymns, such phenomenal poems, but he did so. And how did he do so? What Bede tells us in his history, okay, ecclesiastical history of the English people, in this book, Bede informs us readers that Caedmon was an illiterate person, okay, illiterate cowherd in the monastery of Whitby. But it's like God appeared to him, divinely inspired. God appeared to him and told him that you write and sing of the creation, you tell my story. So the hymn, what did he write? He wrote the hymn. Caedmon's most famous work is his hymn, a short 9-line poem praising God's creation of the heavens and the earth. Now see, like I said, I'll try to make short summary videos on all the works, okay. If you are in a hurry, then of course you can Google and read the summaries or read the works themselves. If you can do that, that's very, very good. But I will still give small summaries, 5-minute, 6-minute summaries of the works, okay? But here, what are the facts we have to remember for question and answers and tick marks and whatever? As literature students, what do we have to remember? That Caedmon was illiterate. He was divinely inspired that, write songs of the creation, and then he wrote his famous work, Hymn. The name of the work is Hymn, but commonly we call it Caedmon's Hymn. Now suppose I write a work and it's entitled Nature, okay? Now what will you do? You will say, let's read Nature. No, you'll say, let's read the book written by Suranjali, Nature, or you'll say Suranjali's Nature. Suranjali's Nature, let's read it. So, similarly, Caedmon did not write, the title of the book is not Caedmon's Hymn. The title of the book is Hymn, but we refer to it as Caedmon's Hymn. Whenever you say hymn, can be so many books, right? So many hymns. But when we say Caedmon's Hymn, we know that this is the body of literature that we are referring to. So, what is the fact we have to remember? His most famous work is his Hymn, a short 9-line poem. We have to remember it is a 9-line poem praising God's creation. Okay, so all of this, keep remembering, that is not it's not a product of his studies. It's not a product of him studying. It is said that he was divinely inspired. So he talks about the creation of the heavens and earth. The Caedmonian school, the term Caedmonian school, originally referred to all the Old English religious poetry that was believed to be written by Caedmon or in his style. That is, whoever copied his style, whoever wrote in his style, was also said to belong to the Caedmonian school. So verses such as Exodus, Genesis, Christ and Satan and Daniel are religious poems that belong to the Caedmonian school. So all of this you have to again remember. These are facts, nothing to explain. These are names of the books that you have to remember. Then you have most celebrated work is Caedmon's Hymn, like I mentioned. And finally, what is his poetic style? So Caedmon's poetic style is alliterative, and one of its feature is the kenning. Now see, I've also included Caedmon's picture over here, okay, just for reference. So you can see he's still holding an instrument, and if I'm not mistaken, then he's holding a lyre. Okay, I might be wrong, but from the picture, I think he's holding a lyre. So remember that Roman Britain was at the time, okay, that Britain was still Roman or sub-Roman, and that is the time that Caedmon was there, and he's singing of the hymns in his lyre, okay. So I might be wrong, this is just from the picture I have gathered, but it looks like it, okay. So you can also do a fact check if you want, but I'm just saying it. I think it is that when I look at the picture, okay. I think he's holding a lyre. So now let's go to the concrete facts. What is alliteration? His poetic style is alliteration. Now I have already talked about alliteration many times in my other videos, okay. So I don't feel like repeating everything here, but I will still just for recap explain a little bit. So alliteration is the occurrence of the same letter or sound. I told you, same letter. That is, if the words are arranged in such a way that all the words one after the other will have the same letter, S, S, S. For example, she sells seashells on the seashore. So S, 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 right? That is also alliteration. And I told you in my alliteration video that it has to do with the sound as well. I have a separate video on alliteration. If you haven't watched it, then do so. It's a detailed discussion again. So it's the same sound also. It does not necessarily have to be the same letter all the time. It can be the same sound also. So that's fine. But what I want to discuss here is the kenning. Kenning I have not discussed in any of my other videos. So I want to talk about the kenning. Many people think that kenning is the origin of the metaphor. But kenning is not the origin of the metaphor. It is a type of metaphor. Kenning, I'll tell you what does kenning mean. That you use two words. It's a compound expression. Two words you use together, okay, to use it as a metaphor for something. I'll give you examples for ship, okay. For ship, the most common example is this, that for ship, instead of saying that, oh, look at that ship, you will say, I'll just look at the actual meaning, okay. For the ship, you will say, look at that oar steed. Okay, this is Old English. You're using in Old English. Then, for example, if you're looking at the sun, you say, look at the sun. Instead of that, you'll say that, look at God's beacon. compound expression, two words, no, compounded together. So God's beacon, what is it a metaphor for? The sun. Then you have, say, sea. Look at the sea. Instead of saying that look at the sea, you say look at the Swan Road. Okay, so you're using two words again, Swan Road, to refer to the sea. So many people say that okay, kenning was used in Old English. All of this was Old English literature. Okay, Old English language. Sorry. So in Old English, you're using these kind of kennings. Okay, and it is a metaphor. It is a metaphor. So is this the origin of metaphor? Is this the origin of metaphor? There are many debates like that, but generally it is not considered to be the origin of metaphor. Rather, it is considered to be a type of metaphor. Okay, a type of metaphor where you use compound expression, two words to refer, like use it as a metaphor for something else. So this is what a kenning is. So alliteration and kenning, these two are the poetic style of Caedmon. So whoever followed this style said, or whatever hymns he has written, or whatever poems he has written, is Caedmon's. Okay, his Caedmonian school, and whoever copies his style or wrote in his style is said to belong to the Caedmonian school, right? Now, so this is done. Now we're going to go to the Cynewulfian school. So let us have a look at the Cynewulfian school. Okay, so Cynewulf, a 9th century Old English poet, is known for his signed poems. Okay, so and his school, a group of poets, is characterized by their shared style and themes. The same thing like Caedmon. Okay, whoever wrote in his style, or used similar themes and tropes in their poems, then they were said to belong to the Caedmonian school. In the same way, whoever followed Cynewulf's style, then they were known to belong to the Cynewulfian school. So particularly religious content and a connection to the Northumbrian or Mercian dialect. So style for him was alliteration and kenning. For Cynewulfian, it has to do with the Northumbrian or the dialect, the language in which he wrote. So Cynewulfian school, you have to remember, what is the fact we have to remember? That he is known for his signed poems. The only one from this period who has actually signed at the end of his poems, and we know for sure that he has written them. So this is the Cynewulfian school. So his 4 signed poems are the Fates of the Apostles, Christ II, the Ascension, Juliana, and Elaine. Or Elaine. These are the names that we have to remember. That if you are given a choice between the works by Cynewulf and the works by Caedmon, if you're given a choice between the two, you have to know that what works did Cynewulf write and what works did Caedmon write. So whenever there's a choice, you can actually distinguish between the two. So what works did he write? He wrote the Apostles, Christ II, the Ascension, Juliana, and Elaine. This is for sure he has signed his poems in them. Now, unsigned poems are also there. Like, you have to understand this. I'm writing a particular, say I'm writing haikus, okay, 2-line poems. I'm writing haikus. I'm writing all the haikus, okay. And, some of my poems I don't sign. But I write haikus, and when you come across these poems, you say, okay, maybe Suranjali only must have written them. And somebody will ask you, why? Why do you think that Suranjali has written them? Then you will say, because she writes haikus. This is her style of writing. This is how she writes. So most probably she has written them. So you're guessing, right? Similarly, unsigned poems. Okay, there are many poems that follow Cynewulf's style, but he did not sign those poems. The only 4 poems that he signed was the Fate of the Apostles, Christ II, the Ascension, Juliana, and Christ II, the Ascension, Juliana, and Elaine. These are the only 4 poems that he has signed. But similarly, like there are some poems that follow his style, exactly his style, and people think that it's he who has written them. So there are some unsigned poems as well. Some unsigned poems are attributed or thought that Cynewulf must have written them. Okay, attributed to Cynewulf or his school, including Andreas, the Phoenix, the Dream of the Rood, the Descent into Hell, Guthlac, the Wanderer, and some riddles. So from here you have to remember the 4 signed poems. You have to remember the Dream of the Rood. I've given it in yellow because it's very, very important. Repeatedly it has also featured, okay, here and there in our academics, okay, examinations. And then you have the Wanderer. This also you have to remember. So these are the important poems. Then you have religious themes. What does he write about? His poetry often explores religious themes, including the lives of saints, the Christian faith, and the nature of earthly life. So this is factual, nothing else to explain, pretty easy. And then you have writing style. Like you have alliteration and kenning for Cateman. How does Steinwolf write? So most of Steinwolf's signed poems written in alliterative verse, same, and belong to the broader genre of hagiography. What is hagiography? The writing of the sacred or the legends of saint. Hagiography is like you are celebrating or talking about the legends of saints. You're talking about particular saints and their life, okay? Particular saints and their life. Then you have the work of Steinwolf and his school marks an advance upon the writing of the school of Cateman. That means Cateman started it, Steinwolf pulled it further, okay? It is a development. So this is Steinwolfian school. We are going to move on to the last slide. Okay, so I just mentioned that we're moving on to the last slide. Actually, this is the second last slide, and it is equally important, of course. We're going to talk about the manuscripts that have preserved the poetry from the Old English period. So Old English poetry has survived almost entirely in 4 manuscripts, okay? So what is a manuscript? We have to understand. So a manuscript is a book, document, or piece of music written by hand rather than typed or printed. So anything, piece of document, story, book, music, anything that is written by hand, it is not typed or printed, no digital intervention. This is solely human in nature, okay? So you're writing with your hand. So there are 4 manuscripts that have survived from this period. They have been compiled and they have been collected, compiled, and kept, okay? So they have been arranged. So the first one is the Exeter book. The Exeter book is a manuscript, okay, written by hand, containing a collection of Old English poetry, including riddles, elegies, and other works. So you can collect works written by different people. Like I have this book, okay, you get what was it? I think A Poem for Every Autumn Day, okay? A Poem for Every Autumn Day. You have different poems written by different writers compiled into this book. Different poets have written different poems on autumn, and they've compiled it into a book, and I bought that 100 poems a poem a day, okay, for a poem for every autumn day, okay? So it can be a poem by Wordsworth, it can be a poem by Keats, it can be different poems by different authors or different poets, okay, and they've compiled it into a book, okay? Or you can also have a book, okay, which contains poems by the same poet. For example, I have a collection of 100 poems of Wordsworth, or 100 poems of Keats, or 100 poems of Coleridge. You can have a book that is a compilation of poems by different authors, or it's a compilation of poems by the same author. So the Exeter book also is a manuscript containing a collection of Old English poetry, including riddles. There are riddles also, elegies, and other works, okay, in this collection. They have compiled it together. So according to Patrick Connor, the original scribe who wrote the text probably did not write it as a single volume. That is, whoever wrote the text did not write it all together as a book. He actually divided it, okay, but rather 3 separate manuscripts. He wrote it differently, okay, which were later compiled into the Exeter book codex, okay. So it is a compilation of poems. You have to remember this Exeter book. Then you have the Junius manuscript. What is the Junius manuscript? This manuscript of Old English biblical poetry. What was the Exeter book? It contains Old English poems and also riddles and also elegies, okay, and other works. Here in the Junius manuscript, it contains biblical poetry. So it contains the sole surviving copies of 4 long Old English poems, which modern editors have titled Genesis. This is not original titles, okay? Modern editors have titled these poems. So you have Genesis, Exodus, Daniel, and Christ, and Satan. And this Junius manuscript is preserved in Oxford in the Bodleian library, okay, it's there now. Then you have the Vercelli book, okay. The Vercelli book is a collection of Anglo-Saxon texts that was written by a monastic scribe in the late 10th century. So these are facts, there's nothing to explain. 10th century, this is a collection again, okay. Exeter book, collection of different things. Junius manuscript, collection of biblical poetry. Vercelli book is a collection of it is a collection of Anglo-Saxon texts which has been written by a monastic scribe. One person has written all of this in the late 10th century, and its authorship remains anonymous. We don't know who has written it, but likely a person has written this whole thing. And it contains a mix of prose, homilies. What are homilies? These are sermons, okay? Sermons. So these are prose sermons and poems, all in Old English. So I told you what is Old English in my previous video. We discussed Old English is composed of Latin, Germanic tribes, right? So the Germanic languages, and you have Celtic languages, right? So because, you know, Celtic Britain, then Roman Britain, and then Sub-Romano Britain, and then finally Anglo-Saxon England. So all of the amalgamation of all the languages. So it was written all in Old English. Together they are Old English, right? Together they're Old English language. So it is all written in Old English. And finally, we have the most celebrated one, the Beowulf manuscript. So the sole surviving manuscript of the epic poem Beowulf, known as the Noel Codex, and housed in the British Library. So this Beowulf manuscript currently is in the British Library. Besides Beowulf, the manuscript also contains a fragment of the life of Saint Christopher, Wonders of the East, Letter of Alexander to Aristotle, and a poetic translation of Judith. So this book also contains that. So this is very factual, very on the point. So there's nothing to explain here. We just have to remember the facts. And finally, we have to understand the manuscript illumination. Okay, why these manuscripts are important? Manuscripts are important. They're handwritten. All of these are handwritten, right? So handwritten, you can understand the style of language. You can understand the you know, the strokes of the lines also tell you a lot about you know, the time, about the person who has been writing this. Okay, so you have the language, the way you're writing, the calligraphy, right, how it was used, and you have beautiful manuscript illumination. What is manuscript illumination? We also do this, right? Like for example, when I was in college, okay, and I used to write say notes in class. I'm writing notes in class, and then sometimes, you know, you tend to, you know, zone out if you're zoning out. And what happens, sometimes I used to draw in the sides of our copy. We've all done this, okay? So we used to draw in the sides of at home also. Suppose you're reading a novel and you're annotating, right? You're underlining and everything. Sometimes you tend to draw, right? You're talking on the phone and you're just like scribbling on you tend to draw. In these what does that tell you? It tells you about me. What was I thinking at the time? What was I doing at the time, right? Now in these manuscripts also, more formally, they deliberately, by choice, they used to draw. They used to illuminate the manuscript. You're writing in between, like we draw margins, right? And when we were younger also, we used to decorate the margins sometimes. I've done it in school, so I'm just giving an example that, you know, I used to decorate the margins very properly and all, okay, when I was younger, even with color pencils and designs. So these margins that I'm drawing now, these are manuscript illumination. I'm drawing with my hand and it's like nice. And these manuscripts have very beautiful drawings and illumination. And what does it tell us? Illuminated manuscripts are handwritten books with painted decoration that generally includes precious metals such as gold or silver. Now we have all of these processed paints, right, that we can use, or colors and sketch pens and pencils, and that time they were using all of this, gold or silver also. So the pages were made from animal skin, commonly calf, sheep or goat. So this tells us a lot about the time. And then you have illustrations have conveyed meaning and added visual dimension to literature. So they give you visual dimension, you know, like sort of an artistic expression also, a visual dimension also for you to visualize, and at the same time it conveys meaning. Okay, there can be say if you're writing about an elephant, you can actually draw the elephant and everything all around. No, like I'm just giving an example that it tells us, gives us a visual dimension. Now we have illustrated books, no, we draw whatever is written, we draw. Similarly, illuminated manuscripts are like this, the designs, you know, they tell us a lot about the people, they tell us a lot about the times, they tell us a lot about the book itself. So this is manuscript illumination. So now we're going to move on to the last slide. So these are the prose works that we're going to discuss lastly, and this is very factual, so please do remember them. So what were the prose works like? These were predominantly religious and practical. So you have much of the surviving prose focuses on religious themes, including homilies, that is sermons, saints' life and biblical translations. You have legal and administrative also prose works, legal writings, wills, charters to form a significant part of the prose corpus. Some of these legal charters and wills wills have survived, and it is also natural also, right? You have so many different kingdoms fighting with each other, new political systems coming up every now and then. So you have new wills, new charters, and you have new political systems. You have to write them down, no, like that. Like for example, today I'm ruling and tomorrow you come to rule, so you'll issue a new way of life, right? You'll issue a new rule or a new will or a new charter, and some of them have been preserved. Okay, so influence of Latin, the influence of Latin, the language of the church, is evident in the translations and the overall style of some prose. So yeah, Latin was already there in Roman Britain. The church was using Latin as well, so this is there. Then oral tradition. While prose works began to appear in written form, the Anglo-Saxon period was also characterized by a strong oral tradition. We all know this, okay, because not much has survived, right? So oral tradition was going on, so with poetry and songs playing a vital role in cultural life. Vital role in cultural life, I told you, in Roman Britain you had lyres and singers and dancers, right? In Roman Britain you had all of these cultural aspects of life. So you have the songs and these plays, right? You have the Greek chorus, like for example before Roman you have the Greek chorus. Influence will stay on, right? And you have the lyre playing in Roman Britain and songs being written. There's a strong oral tradition, okay, oral tradition of all of this passing down by generation. Then you have limited surviving works. So compared to poetry, fewer prose works have survived from this period, partly due to the limited literacy and focus on oral traditions. Like I told you, focus on oral tradition generation after generation. It's handed down by word of mouth. And limited literacy, because not everybody was educated. At the same time, I told you there was wars being fought every now and then. So scientifically, culturally, like you will be a little slower, not stagnant but slower than previous years. Okay, so we're going to talk about the notable prose works and their examples. So Anglo-Saxon Chronicle is the first one we have to remember. This historical record began around the time of King Alfred's reign. He's also one Anglo-Saxon king, okay. King Alfred's reign provides a valuable recount of events from Anglo-Saxon period. You have the homilies or the sermons, right? Alfred, a priest, wrote a collection of homilies. You have to just remember Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, okay, it talks about it gives us information about King Alfred's reign. Homilies or the sermons to talk about religious discourses. Alfred has written it, he's a priest. Then you have Saints' Lives. Alfred also composed, so two works we know by Alfred. One was this sermons, homilies, and another one is Saints' Lives, the lives of saints, which were which accounts the lives of saints and the deeds of Christian saints. Then you have translations. You have translations of Latin texts such as Gospel of Saint John, which was produced during this period. Then you have law codes. The law code of King Ethelbert the First of Kent, the one who first time was converted or baptized, right? He converted to Christianity, written shortly after the arrival of Saint Augustine of Canterbury, is an example of early English prose. And then you have medical tracts. Two medical tracts possibly from the 8th century also exist. So these are just facts that you have to remember. Most important is the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, homilies, and Saints' Lives by Alfred. So so all of these things you have to remember. These are just factual information, nothing to explain there. So during the Anglo-Saxon period, Old English prose works primarily consisted of legal documents, religious texts like homilies and Saints' Lives, and translations from Latin, which the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle being a notable historical record. So all of this we have done. I think that this is a lot to process, and these are the important works from the Anglo-Saxon period, the literary characteristics of the age, which is an amalgamation of all of these different aspects of life that actually contributed to Old English literature, to Old English language, and the Old English Anglo-Saxon period, this whole thing. So I hope that the two videos together now make a lot more sense, and I really hope that this video has been helpful for you. And if it has, then please don't forget to like the video, share the video, and subscribe to my channel for similar content. That is it for today, guys. I will see you in my next video. Until then, I really hope that you stay healthy and happy. See you in the next one, guys.